أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Welcome to another Quran study, brothers and sisters. We are going to read from chapter 48, verse 14. The chapter is called Victory. Al-Fath. To God belongs the sovereignty of the heavens and the earth. He forgives whomever he wills and punishes whomever he wills. God is forgiver, most merciful. The sedentary who stay behind will say, when you are expected to collect spoils of war, let us follow you to share in this. They thus wish to alter God's words. Say, you will not follow us. This is God's decision. They will then say, you must be envious of us for staying behind. Indeed, they rarely understood anything. So basically, here God is talking about the spoils of war, where the people who were left behind, they didn't want to, when God told them to go to war, fight those who were fighting the submitters at that time, there were a group of people who didn't want to fight. They didn't go to war, but after winning the war, you have, of course, the spoils of war, which they wanted to have. And then God is telling them that they cannot follow, um, because they were totally focused on this earthly life and the spoils of war. They were not true believers, of course, and basically it's not about these people. They didn't understand that it's not about the money or about this worldly life, right? The whole message, the whole idea of submission is actually to save your soul from the hellfire, and protect yourself from that hellfire. But because of that, these people, they didn't understand this message. Their whole minds, they only think about this worldly life, and the things that they can get out of that, of course. 16. The test for early generations. Say to the sedentary Arabs who stay behind, you will be invited to face powerful people and to fight them unless they submit. If you obey, God will reward you with a generous recompense. But if you turn away again, as you did in the past, He will requite you with a painful retribution. So again, God is, telling them to go and fight with powerful people, and He's giving them another chance to follow this command of God. And if they don't do that, then God says He will requite you with a painful retribution. The blind is not to be blamed. The crippled is not to be blamed, and the sick is not to be blamed. Those who obey God and His messenger, He will admit them into gardens with flowing streams. As for those who turn away, He will requite them with a painful retribution. So here, this means that when someone is attacking you and you are in war, of course you need to protect yourself, right? God doesn't want us to be like sheep or herded that. If someone attacks us, that we don't do anything. We need to stand up and fight for our rights and for our life and for our families, of course. Like we can't stay and let people come and kill us or our you know so this means that we need to fight back. But there are also people who are like crippled, and people who are blind, and basically people who really can't fight. They are not to be blamed, so they don't have to if they can't. So this commandment is only for those who actually can fight. They need to stand up and they need to follow this commandment. God is pleased with the believers who pledged alliance to you under the tree. He knew what was in their hearts, and consequently, He blessed them with contentment and rewarded them with an immediate victory. Additionally, they gained many spoils. God is Almighty, most wise. So you had a group of people who they pledged an alliance to you under the tree, it says. So these people who said to the messenger that they will follow him and that they will fight next to him. And God is telling us here that basically they are the winners, right? And they received the spoils of war after the war, of course, but they are also like the real winners of this of the afterlife, of course. 20. God has promised you many spoils that you will gain. He thus advanced some benefits for you in this life, and he has withheld the people's hands of aggression against you and has rendered this a sign for the believers. He thus guides you in a straight path. As for the group that you could not possibly defeat, God took care of them. God is omnipotent. So in also the other verses of the Quran, God is telling the believers that the believers will always be victorious. So if there is a war and you have believers on the one side, even if they are like not a lot of people, even if their numbers are less than the opponents, God promises that He will help the believers. And in other verses, we read that God is sending His angels to help the believers, and He promises them victory. This means that, if something like this happens to us, and like we as submitters, we need to fight against an enemy, so we definitely need to know that we will definitely be victorious. And if someone, while fighting in the cause of God, dies, that person will go to heaven, right? Because he is fighting in the cause of God. And God promises those who die in the cause of God that they will go to heaven. So in any case, if you die, you are still actually a winner because you will go to a much better place than the current one that we have, the earthly life. So this means that the believers, they will always be victorious, no matter what the outcome is, right? So even if you die or even if you stay alive, God promises victory, mashallah. As for the group that you could not possibly defeat, God took care of them. God is omnipotent. So, God is in power and He is doing everything. So, He is the one who kills actually, or He is the one who controls the outcome of the war. And in another Quran verse, God tells that it was not you who killed, or it was not you who threw when you threw the weapon, right? The messenger also talks about that while he was explaining us that God is doing everything, that God is running everything. So basically, in these words, God is the one who is in control and He is doing everything. Victory guaranteed for the believers. 22. If the disbelievers ever fall to you, they would turn around and flee. They have no Lord and Master. They have no helper. Such is God's system throughout history, and you will find that God's system is unchangeable. He is the one who withheld their hands of aggression against you and withheld your hands of aggression against them in the valley of Mecca, after He had granted you victory over them. God is seer of everything you do. It is they who disbelieved and barred you from the sacred masjid, and even prevented your offerings from reaching their destination. There were believing men and women within the enemy camp whom you did not know, and you were about to hurt them unknowingly. God thus admits into His mercy whomever He wills. If they persist, He will requite those among them who disbelieve with a painful retribution. So this is also a good example of God running everything, because people could never know that there were believing men and women within the enemy camp, right? And God is fully aware of those people. And God is also protecting them. So you have two sides. You have the believers and the disbelievers fighting with each other, and then God knows that there are believing men and women in the opposite side, whom the believers fight with, and God is also protecting them. So even if they wanted to hurt them, because they are believers and because that God promised to help them, God is protecting them from being hurt, basically. So this is actually, and God is telling this in the Quran. He's telling this about the things that happened before, to assure us that God keeps His promise. In all these verses that we read in the Quran, not only this war, of course, but also what happened with Abraham, with a lot of other messengers, a lot of other submitters and believers, um, God always protected them. So it's a guarantee that God gives us, that we shouldn't be afraid. We should know that God is with us and that He is going to protect us. 26. While those who disbelieved were enraged and their hearts were filled with pride of the days of ignorance, God blessed his messenger and the believers with peaceful contentment and directed them to uphold the word of righteousness. This is what they well deserved. God is fully aware of all things. God has fulfilled his messenger's truthful vision. You will enter the sacred masjid, God willing, perfectly secure, and you will cut your hair or shorten it as you fulfill the pilgrimage rituals there. You will not have any fear. Since he knew what you did not know, he has coupled this with an immediate victory. Um, so the messenger had a vision, a vision where God showed basically that they will be victorious and that they will enter the sacred masjid, and God is saying perfectly secure, and you will cut your hair or shorten it as you fulfill the pilgrimage ritual. So this is about the war where the messenger. Um, basically went to the sacred masjid, the Kaaba, and they were victorious there, right? So they went there and they won the war. And before they even won the war, God gave his messenger a vision. So he already knew that this was going to happen, and it was fulfilled. This vision was fulfilled by God. The great prophecy. He is the one who sent his messenger with the guidance and the religion of truth to make it prevail over all other religions. God suffices as a witness. And the footnote says, this important prophecy informs us that submission will inevitably dominate the whole world. This, together with verses 9, 33, 41, 53, and 61:9 leave no doubt that God's mathematical miracle of the Quran will play a major role in this prophecy. Solid Quranic mathematical evidence points to God's messenger of the covenant as fulfilling this prophecy. See Appendices 2 and 26 for the evidence and specific details. And of course, the messenger talks about this, right? He said, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the videos which was taken, which was done in 1989, where he says that the whole world will accept submission, and submission will be, the religion, and this will happen within like 50 years. And this verse, this is actually like the great prophecy, it says, and this verse is the proof of that, which is going to happen. And I want to read again. It says, "He is the one who sent his messenger with the guidance and the religion of truth to make it prevail over all other religions." So at the moment, there are so many religions, right? You have, of course, Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism. You have atheist people. You have so many other religions, and God is talking about that submission, it will prevail over all the religions. So people are going to accept submission. Qualities of the believers. Muhammad, the messenger of God, and those with him are harsh and stern against the disbelievers, but kind and compassionate amongst themselves. You see them bowing and prostrating, and they seek God blessings and approval. Their marks are on their faces because of prostrating. This is the same example as in the Torah. Their example in the gospel is like plants that grow taller and stronger and please the farmers. He thus enrages the disbelievers. God promises those among them who believe and lead a righteous life forgiveness and a great recompense. So this is one of the verses which a lot of people are using. I know a few people who, when they pray and they do sujood, they put something on their foreheads. They put something like a stone, or they put their heads very hard on the ground, so that when you look at them, there is this mark on their foreheads. And the reason why they are doing is they try to prove that they are people who are prostrating and doing sujood. And basically, how I see this is that if someone does this only to show off, right, to show that they are people who are praying, but God is not talking about a um, some something on your forehead. It's This means that God is talking about that the mark on their faces is like they are very happy, they are extremely joyful because of what they are doing, right? So and God is talking about, he says, Muhammad, the messenger of God, and those with him are harsh and stern against disbelievers, but kind and compassionate amongst themselves. So they are very kind towards each other. They are laughing. So you can see when they are praying, when they are with each other, you can see on their faces that they are very, very happy to be with each other. And because they accepted the message, God promised them victory, and they became victorious. So and God promises that the believers, they will be perfectly happy, and starting in this world. It's not going to start after we die. Basically, it's going to start in this world. And the messenger is also talking about this. He says that when you do the things that God commands you, and you're just following God, um, uh, and you keep your word, God promises you perfect health, perfect wealth. Um, um, so this is what I understand, like from marks are on their faces. Before I understood it as like when you do your sujood, because of the sujood that you're making. Today you can also use like these soft, when you pray, you have this cloth, right, that you put on the ground. You can also use very soft things. So this means that even if you do like 100 times sujood, every time when you pray, you're not going to have any marks on your forehead. And the verse goes on, it said, this is the same example as in the Torah. Their example in the gospel is like plants that grow taller and stronger and please the farmers. He thus enrages the disbelievers. God promises those among them who believe and reach a righteous life, forgiveness, and a great recompense. So one of the other things is, of course, when you follow the commandments of God, and and you truly uh, um, you do your prayers, you give the zakat, you don't lie, read the Quran, and you do your best. The more you do that, the more you grow your soul. So the whole point of this is, of course, growing your soul. And when I read this verse about like plants that grow taller and stronger, it also reminds me of what the messenger has taught us about growing and making our soul stronger. We go to chapter 49, the walls, Al-Hujarat. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. O you who believe, do not place your opinion above that God and his messenger. You shall reference God. God is hearer, omniscient. All you who believe, do not raise your voices above the voice of the prophet, nor shall you shout at him as you shout at each other, lest your works become nullified while you do not perceive. Surely those who lower their voices and at the messenger of God are the ones whose hearts are prepared by God to become righteous. They have deserved forgiveness and a great recompense. And the footnote says, whenever the word prophet, Nabi, is used, is in reference to Muhammad, it invariably refers to him during his life, not after his death. Obviously, we cannot possibly raise our voices above Muhammad's voice now that he is dead. See also 3356. And the footnote of 3 says, respecting the messenger helps outsiders and visitors in coming to God's message. So the messenger also talks about these verses. You have a sound recording where one of the people in the masjid is warning the others how to behave, towards the messenger of the covenant. And we can clearly hear in that voice recording that some people, they don't like it, and the person who is telling them how to behave is only reading these verses from the Quran. He is telling them that, when you are with the messenger, you should be respectful towards him. You shouldn't raise your voice above the voice of the messenger. This means that and also God gives us the reason for that, right? So when you are there sitting with the messenger, and you are being unrespectful towards him, talking, shouting, or putting your own ideas in front of his, like making your own ideas your god. And like Edip did, we know from the voice recording again, that this is exactly what happened to him. He was like idolizing his own ideas, um, thinking that he is right, even when the messenger actually told him not to do that, and he basically did it to save him. And he says so in the voice record. He says we are trying to help him. If he keeps doing what he's doing, if he keeps idolizing his own ideas, then he's going to end up in hell. So this is actually very important, that we can have some ideas about a lot of things, but if the messenger has told us something about that specific topic, we should leave our own ideas behind us if that's against the idea that the messenger has given. And the other important thing, of course, is when you are with a messenger and you are shouting to him and you are being unrespectful to him, and if someone comes inside and he looks at the people who are very close to the messenger and they are being very unrespectful, this person can leave, without maybe even listening to the message, and it's going to be your fault. That's why he will say, and the messenger, he gives exactly the same example. He says, when someone comes in and he sees how you behave, and he will leave, so all the things that you have done, it will be nullified. That's why it's very important not to idolize our ideas. But one of the other things, of course, here is the ego. We learn from the Quran that there are many verses where people, when God chose a messenger, they didn't like them to be messengers. They said, they're like, did God chose him while we are much better than him, or we have more money, more power than him? Why did God choose him? Like, and now we need to follow this guy. They they had like a so high ego that they didn't want to follow a chosen messenger of God, because they thought that they were better than that messenger, and they couldn't believe it, basically. So it's important to kill our egos, especially when it's about the message and the messenger. And of course, when we look at the messenger of the covenant, the things that happened, what people did when he came with the message, in the first place, a lot of people, and the messenger also explains this, right? He tells us that it was like huge when the miracle of 19 um, was published. There was a lot of noise, like a lot of people, they were so happy that the computer proved that the Quran was sent by God. Look, everyone was happy until the time when the messenger talked about following the Quran alone, and not following hadith. And of course, the two so-called verses, chapter 9, 28 and 29, that it wasn't from the Quran. And of course, that Dr. Rashad told them that he was a messenger of God, and they didn't like it. So and suddenly they forget about the miracle 19, right? Because all of these things, these people who in the first place, who said that they believed in the miracle of 19, they stopped believing it only because Dr. Rashad told them that he was a messenger of God, and they should leave the hadith and follow the Quran alone. And God says, surely those who lower their voices at the messenger of God are the ones whose hearts are prepared by God to become righteous. There's also one thing what the messenger says. He says, at this moment, if you think that I'm perfect, is, because God wants you to think that I'm perfect. Because, if you deserve to believe, if you are one of those souls who deserve to go to heaven, then God is going to help you towards that, right? When God sends a messenger, He's going to make you, believe in Him. He's going to help you out. And if you are not a soul who deserves to go to heaven, then you're going to have problems accepting the messenger and the message. You're going to see problems in him. You're going to think that he is, he has some bad ideas, or he can't think logically, or even if he as a human being make mistakes, you are going to use that not to believe in the messenger. And you have people like that. You have people that, when the messenger says something or makes a mistake as a human being, they use that because they think that if you were to be a messenger, you can't make like humanly mistakes. Of course, when it's about the message, then there is no mistake because that's totally controlled by God. Um, Let me see. So I think I should end here, brothers and sisters. I don't know if I went too fast, but um, mm, uh, Brother Suleiman,
Inshallah, thank
should
you.
I?
Yes. Yeah, you read 2 pages, right?
Yeah, 2 pages. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, brother.
Okay. Okay. Inshallah, yeah, good. Thank you. Inshallah.
Mashallah.
Subhanallah, thank you.
Yeah, you did go a little fast.
Yeah, a little fast, but I
So,
can keep
yeah.
reading. But like
No,
there
no.
are a lot of things.
We
I
can
know, I
talk
know.
about. We can talk about
Yeah, yeah.
the verses. Yeah.
I was joking. Yeah, brother. I was joking.
Yeah. No. I think maybe if you want, we have some extra time. Maybe you can elaborate on, when he talks about submission prevailing. If the verse
uh,
talks about submission prevailing, maybe we can discuss that. Yeah.
Let me see which one, brother.
God,
Which number?
the verse that says God will make it prevail over all the religions. So
Oh, yeah,
God
that
will,
one.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like, the messenger is talking about this in the video recordings, but also in the voice recordings, right? And then he says there basically that the whole world they are going to accept submission, and that the miracle of 19 is going to play a huge role. um, the first time that I heard this, it was like, when you think of how the world is currently, how it's going, and how people are, people living their lives, not knowing the Quran, the true submission, not knowing the miracle of 19. Um, of course, it makes you think of how that's going to happen, but God is incapable of doing everything. And um, like for example, the
You said
COVID-19
God is
happened.
incapable of doing everything.
He is
What?
capable of doing
Okay,
everything. Yeah,
sorry.
I didn't say incapable there. That would be the
That's
opposite
what
of
I heard.
submission. Yeah. Oh, he's definitely
Sorry.
capable of doing everything what he wants, brother. Yeah. So,
Mm, hmm
we have seen with the COVID-19, this number 19 came like came everywhere. In every room you could see this number 19 almost. When you go to the hospitals or to the streets and bus stations, on the TV, things happen, right? Like, who would have thought that something big as COVID-19 would happen, and then the whole world will be um, needed to have dealt with it, right? And why 19, right? Why is it not COVID-20, and why is it COVID-19? Of course, we as submitters and people who believe in the miracle of 19, for us is of course different than for other people. For them, maybe it's just a number, but we know that this number 19 is very special. We have learned this from the message of the covenant and the miracle in the Quran. So this shows actually that things can happen quite fast. Also, if I'm not mistaken, we have like 14 or 15 years left. That the messenger said in 1989 that submission will prevail and people will believe in this. So 14 or 15 years are left to fulfill this 50 years prophecy.
So, yeah, I
Suleiman,
mean, of course, like so.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah, alhamdulillah. No, I was just making a comment. I was saying that, now that we have some signs about the, smoke too, I feel that, it's going to come much sooner. I mean, of course, he says within 50 years, right? So it could be even sooner than like the full 50-year period, right?
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
like, I think as the time comes closer, more and more people are going to start talking about the asteroid. And hopefully, I guess, well, unfortunately, after the asteroid hits, I feel like, then, like, just like after COVID hit, like, it's like after the asteroid hits and, people go to the disaster, then as the verse in the Quran says, the people say, God relieve this retribution for us. We are believers, right? So then all these people will, start to reflect as they're stuck in their uh, bunkers or whatever, that they will come to realize that this is the truth from God, and the fact that, especially the fact that it was prophesied in the Quran, more than 1400 years ago. So I think that in itself, plus with, of course, with the mathematical code itself being the primary factor in convincing, the people who are mathematically sophisticated in our generation that people will accept the message. Mashallah.
Yeah, very much. And of course, when things happen, people go and search for answers, right? And the smoke is like definitely in the Quran. God talked about it, and the messenger explained. And like him explaining the situation, telling that an asteroid is going to hit, and how big it is, like and where it's going to hit, and that you're going to have a dust cloud, and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
the sunlight will be held for a few months. Look,
Mm-hmm.
these are extremely detailed, specific information that is
Mm-hmm.
given by the messenger. So
Mm-hmm.
like I'm imagining people when something like this happens, and I think that people are not going to, a lot of people, they think that it's not going to happen, right? Even if they know that an asteroid will come,
Mm-hmm.
most of the people, they don't have this feeling that the world can, something like this can happen. So
Mm-hmm.
they think, oh, it's gonna go past, like it happened
Yeah,
before.
yeah. You know what I heard in the documentary, one of the documentaries I was watching, I think brother Raphael sent it to me uh, about the asteroid. They already know where it's going to go, so they're saying that people people in Western Africa and Eastern Europe are going to see the asteroid fly by. Which means that they have already calculated the position of the Earth. When the asteroid comes and from which side it's going to come. It's going to come from like between Western Africa and Eastern Europe is what the Middle East, right? So that's where it's going to come exactly. And that's what they were saying in the documentary, that people in Western Africa and Eastern Europe are going to see it fly by.
Yeah, and you have this movie of Leonardo DiCaprio, if I'm not mistaken, it's
Hmm.
like Don't Look Up, the movie Don't Look Up, talking
Hmm.
about like an asteroid that's going to hit the Earth and no one is believing him. And then,
Oh, is
you
that
know,
the
um,
one where with the girl from Hunger Games, or that's a different movie?
um, I
No, I
don't
think
know
that's a
about the
different
girl.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's basically like Leonardo DiCaprio is, if I'm not mistaken, he was a professor at the university, and he does some research, and then they found out that the asteroid is going to hit, and the calculations that they had done before were wrong, And there was this other girl, I think she did some calculations, and based on her calculations it's going to, hit the earth. But no one believes, like everyone is thinking like it's not going to happen.
Hmm.
He comes on
Yeah, same
TV
one,
telling the
same
people,
one, same
yeah, yeah.
movie, same movie. Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking
Yeah,
of the
so but
same.
I think still there is something like that, that people, maybe they can't imagine something catastrophic
Yeah,
like
and
this going
it's
to happen,
funny
right?
that movie came out in 2021. 2021 was when Apophis actually passed by last time, and obviously didn't hit the earth. Yeah, so I think the movie probably is depicting the same situation.
But in the
Yeah,
movie it hits the earth, so and then
right.
people die. Yeah, yeah. So,
Right.
and it's going to be catastrophic, right? Like it's going to
Hmm.
hurt a lot of people. It's going to be very difficult for people to live on earth while the whole world is covered with dust. No sunlight for a lot of for a few months. This means that the crops will not grow, and we're going to have problems with transportation, problems with communication as well. I don't know if the satellites then can work, if you have something like that, if you have a dust which is covered, the earth is covered with dust. Maybe that will prevent satellites from working, airplanes from flying. A lot of things can happen. And the verse that you have read, brother, about people are going to ask God, okay, we believe now, please help us with this. So this shows that it's going to be very difficult for the people on earth. And God promises, of course, to protect the believers. MashaAllah.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Sulaiman.
mean it's yes, brother.
I have like two questions. It's not actually this topic, but I was really wondering about hanging around with non-submitters. So if you're friends with a non-submitter, is that permissible or not?
Right. I mean, so the thing is that as long as the person is not opposed to submission in the sense that he's not completely closed-minded and he has made his position like against it and he's neutral about it, like it's definitely fine. Like you can see that person as a potential submitter, even though at the time they may not accept it, but they might be someone who hasn't had the opportunity to get exposed to the message, and you have hope that this person is kind and friendly and open-minded, and once it's the right time and stuff, and you have the opportunity to give them the message properly, that they will ultimately accept the message, right? So you have some kind of hope in your heart for that person based on the circumstance and the situation, and you knowing the person, you feel in your heart that this person could potentially become a submitter. In that situation you treat him as a potential submitter, and God says, you can befriend such people in the Quran. You can be equitable with them. God loves those who are equitable. But when it comes to not befriending specifically, one, these are people that will mock and ridicule submission, your religion, or it's like, or they might not even do that necessarily, but mocking and ridiculing your religion is a sign that a person has looked at the message and made a stance that it's ridiculous or whatever in their eyes, and they're not going to accept it, right? So let's say even a person who is not literally mocking and ridiculing, but like they have made their stance clear, like, hey, someone tells you, look, Adam, if you keep talking about this, we're not going to hang out, or please don't talk to me about this anymore. I don't want to do anything to do with this. Or you understand that it is something that they don't ever want to be talked about, and they have made up their mind that they're never going to follow this, no matter what. At that point you have no hope for them, right? So then God talks about in the Quran about, do not befriend people who are hopelessly stuck in disbeliefs, like those who are in the graves, right? So then they fall in that category where you have no hope for this person. Like Abraham with his father, he disowned him once he realized that his father was destined for hell, meaning like he had no hope. And that's when he realized, okay, well, he's definitely going to hell if he doesn't, if I don't see any hope for him, like he's never going to accept it, right? And so at that point, he disowned his father. So it's the same thing with friends or parents or anybody else for that matter. Once you realize that, there's no way in hell that they're going to accept the message, then yeah, you just have to part ways for your own good.
All right, so that's one question. Another question is that um, I'm unclear about devotion uh, to God. So is it 51% of the day? Is it most of the time? You have to think about God or have to act upon it. It's like I'm unclear on the devotion part of submission.
Diversion?
No, devotion.
Devotion.
Devotion,
Okay. Okay.
devotion
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. 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 So sorry. What was your question about devotion again? Can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, I wasn't clear about devotion. So is it
Mm-hmm.
51% of the day or in general? Is it in the mind, thinking about God or acting upon God, like actively doing
Mm-hmm.
something?
Both.
I'm confused by
Right.
it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, both. Yeah. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
like, you have to do all the commandments first of all that God wants you to do, right? So you have to do everything, like
Willingly.
doing your contact prayers,
Willingly.
all of these things. But even your
Salam
thought is
alaikum.
a yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
sorry, I think he might have meant when say devotion to God.
Yeah, I'm talking about
Um,
devotion to
I
God.
I think maybe he meant that he meant to reverence of God, remembrance of God. You know, where God tells us to remember Him when you're sitting, when you're standing, when you're.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's also relevant. Like, how are we supposed to spend our day remembering God? Do we
The
remember it
messenger talks
just
about
by?
it.
I know,
Mm-hmm.
but what can we talk about this so we remind ourselves and each other?
Yeah, I want to add something, brother. Yeah, so the messenger
Mm-hmm.
talks about like specifically this word devotion, devoting yourself to God. And in that video, he is talking about, willingly, happily, following all the commandments that God has given us and devoting ourselves towards
Mm-hmm.
everything that, God commanded us. And besides that, we also know from the video where the messenger talks about God is running everything, that we need to, repeat. God is doing everything all the time, all day long. We need to do that. So basically, and if God is not on your mind, then you can't you are not doing the commandments, right? So when you're doing the commandments, it means also God is in your mind. And the messenger also tells us, when you think about your prayer, because we need to do our prayers in a certain time period, right? So we are constantly thinking about the time, knowing that okay, it's almost prayer time, so I need to do my prayer. Even that is like a part of remembering God,
Remembering God,
because
yeah.
yeah, because you're fully concentrated on following the commandments. And the messenger says also something like that we need to think as how to plan our day. And when we wake up, everything should be around that planning of doing the commandments that God has given. Like we need to pray 5 times a day, so we need to plan our day accordingly. So when I have a meeting, I need to know, okay, from this time and this time I need to do my prayer. So when I'm going to plan a meeting, it shouldn't be at the time of the prayer time. I wanted to add that,
Hmm.
brother.
Right. So the
Okay.
part about the making God your God 51% of the day, definitely, I mean, keeping God in your mind, and thinking about him and reverencing him is in itself an act of worship, right? Imploring God for anything, or even just thinking about reflecting on God's creation, like the messenger says, how you can make God your God, right? He talks about, for example, let's say you're eating food, right? So you shouldn't just eat food like animals. You should think about the flavor, think about what process, God put everything, all these things through these products. God brought the sunlight, for example, the water from the rain and everything to make these, and think about the flavor, think about the colors, think about the packaging, all these things that God has made possible for you. Appreciate them. So you're actively thinking, it's a constant process, but definitely, your mind, your thoughts is definitely a part of it, because if you say like more than 51% of the day, like, and if you say if it's all just actions, like, you run out of things to do that you think would be, that, would help in sort of working righteousness, so you have to even think about the things like when you're sitting, standing, driving, as the brother said, all this time, that all counts towards your worship. Whatever occupies your mind most of the day is your God, right? So it starts with your mind, definitely.
Okay, so when Wife Khalifa says that you have to remember God most of the day, he's talking about like more than 51% a day. Or does that
Yes.
like in general? Which one is it?
No, more than 51% means majority of your day, right? So majority is going to be anything more than 51% is the majority. So
Yeah, because my
specifically, that
dad
would
said
be,
that's but
yeah.
that's when I told my dad that's about the 51% parts. My dad said that's Rosh Khalifa means that you have to think about God in like most of the day, not specifically 51% a day. Like
No,
in
at
specific.
least 50, at least 51%. He's not saying
And
like it has to be 51, right? But when you say most of the day, that means like if it's anything's more than 50%, it's more than it's most of your day, right? If I say, most of the time you're doing something, it has to be more than 50%.
I
Like
know.
that's right. So that's what it means, right? So literally,
yeah,
if
the
it has to be
messenger talks
51%.
about 100
Yeah.
units, brother, right? Dividing your day into
Hmm.
100 units, and then
I
this means
understand.
that at more than 50 should be you thinking and doing what God commands, right? Thinking about
I
God and
understand.
doing
So
what command says.
I understand. So beforehand, I thought that's it didn't have to be 51% a day. I never heard him say 51%. I thought he said that just like generally think about God, not 51% a day. That's what I thought beforehand. But now I understand it's 51% more than that. I'm clear on that part. Now,
Hmm.
you have to think about God. Is 51% a day thinking acceptable? Does it count? Just think about God. Or do you have to actively do
Yes.
something?
No, thinking counts as well.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Oh, and the messenger says, he says, you need to find excuses to remember God. So, for example, when you wake up, like he explains this in the videos and the voice recordings, he says, when you wake up, you need to say in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, right? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and then La ilaha wahdahu la sharika lah, starting with that. And then when you are going to do your down prayer, you are thinking of God. Before you eat, you need to say in the name of God. When you eat, you need to think about the things that you eat and God has given you. When you go outside and you look at the sky, you need to think of God, Him creating, who has created all these things, right? You look at your children, or when you go into your car, like he basically says you need to find excuses for yourself to remember God. So this means that the submitter needs to find, you need to force yourself, you need to find excuses to remember him. You need to work towards that. It's not like, okay, I'm going to think sometimes of God. No, we as submitters, we need to specifically do things or find excuses.
Okay. Now, things that my dad said that thinking doesn't count at all. It has to be action. Thinking equals to zero. It comes to
No,
liberation.
thinking is
Hmm.
also an action. That's what Brother
Yeah.
Suleiman said, right?
Hmm.
It's also an action, thinking of him,
Hmm.
because your mind can be with something else, right? For example, you can think of money, you can think of woman, you can think of your work, or you can think of a lot of things. And the messenger clearly says that which, um, what is it?
And okay.
Your
Sorry.
mind.
Yeah.
What was it, Brother
Okay.
Suleiman?
I'll read a verse. I'll read a verse. Okay. So this is in Surah 33, verse 23, 21, and I think it's a perfect verse for you for sharing with your dad. It says the prophet's courage. The messenger of God has set up a good example for those among you who seek God and the last day and constantly think about God. Right? So God has to be on your mind all the time, or majority of your time, because whatever else is on your mind, if God is not on your mind, at least 51% of your day, then means something else is your God. If you, let's say you're thinking about work 51% at least of the day, more than 50% of your day, let's say, right? Whatever you're thinking about more than 50% of your day is your God, right? If you think about what people think about you, like, how you look or anything like that, then you made yourself your God, your ego your God. If you think about someone you love, like your spouse or something, more than 50% of your day, then she is your God. Or you think about you're a parent, you're thinking about your kids, or like, you're worried about them, whatever, and you're thinking about them, you know that becomes your God, right? So that's why it's important to constantly think about God as much as you can. God has to be on your mind. Remembering, see, when God says, remember me day and night, right? Remembering God day and night means what? You constantly remember him, think about him. Remembrance is an act of your mind, right?
Yes. Yeah, in a technical sense, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Remembrance is a form
Mm-hmm.
of action.
Mm-hmm. It starts with the mind for sure, right?
Yes. All right. That makes much sense. That's very clear.
So, yeah, also what I think Brother Jaffer was mentioning earlier, this is also explained by the Messenger of the Covenant in the appendix, which is Appendix 27, which I was talking about. Who is your God, right? So I recommend like reading the whole appendix, but I'm just going to read the part that he was talking about the prayer. It says the contact prayers, ways to make God your God, right? So one of them is contact prayer. It says those who believe, it says those who observe the 5 daily prayers come a long way towards commemorating God a significant portion of their waking hours. Salat helps us remember God not only during the few minutes of prayer, but also throughout the times of anticipation, right? The anticipation throughout the hours, it's all a mind. It's all in the mind, right? You're anticipating the prayer. Says at 11 a.m., one may look at his watch to see if the noon prayer is due yet. This act causes one to think about God, and one is credited accordingly. And the references to verse 20, Surah 20, verse 14.
Yeah, mashallah. And 5 time prayers is a commandment of God, right? So
Mm-hmm,
he commands us to
mm-hmm,
pray. And this
mm-hmm,
commandment that God has given us is also helping us
mm-hmm.
in that direction, remembering God
Yeah,
throughout the whole day, right? So it's a great blessing, mashallah.
mashallah. Yeah,
Because
also,
if we didn't have these prayers, maybe it would be more difficult for people to commemorate God, right? If we
mhm.
totally didn't have 5 times prayers in a day.
Yeah, also in number 5 there, it says glorify God day and night. So it's when we eat anything, we shouldn't be like animals. We must reflect on God's creation of the food we are eating, like flavor, our enjoyment due to the senses. God has given us the perfect packaging of the banana or the orange, the varieties of seafoods created by God, etc., and glorify Him as we enjoy His provisions. When we see a beautiful flower or an animal or sunsets, we must glorify God. We must seize every possible opportunity to remember and glorify God so that God may be our God.
Nothing is
Hmm.
fear a form of worship? Because that's what
Hmm.
my dad said. He said that's if you feel a sense of extreme or fear to somebody, that could be your God. You're fearing somebody.
Hmm. If you give someone power that they have the power to benefit you or hurt you, that by definition is idol worship because only God has the power to do all that. Everything is in God's control. But also, again, in Appendix 27, if you look, the thing that is highlighted in bold and put in a box here for attention is says your God is whoever or whatever occupies your mind most of the time. So the messenger of the covenant has explicitly stated that very clearly, whatever occupies your mind most of the times. So.
No, I'm asking
It's
about fear or something. So if you afraid
yeah,
of
fear
somebody
too.
or something, is it shirk?
Yeah, it is because God says the believers they only fear God, you know. So when we fear the retribution, like we don't want to, be punished for the sins. We want to be redeemed. But other than that, God says the believers are fearless. And so if you're afraid of anyone other than God, or being afraid of the people, more than God, I mean that is, idol worship, right?
But isn't it
It's not
natural to be
only, sorry.
but isn't it natural to be afraid in certain situations? For example, if you're getting robbed and you feel a sense of fear and you don't remember, was that shirk or not? If you feel afraid of
Well,
getting robbed,
Yeah,
right.
that's it's like it's in the beginning, I think, brother. Like, because we're so hardwired and trained as humans, and especially, excuse me, the majority of humans, are always either worrying about something, complaining about something, getting upset about something. So, sorry, it becomes like second nature in us, and that's kind of what we have to overcome in the sense if you want to think about that. But in the sense, I mean, if you're getting robbed, I mean, like you have your God created humans. I mean, we're biological, physiological creatures. I mean, yeah, you're gonna have like adrenaline and stuff. I mean, you're gonna have your blood flow that's pumping. So, but I mean, just like in the times of war, I mean, like through the Quran, I mean, they were fighting and stuff, but in the sense that you know, I mean, if there's an altar, God willing, that wouldn't happen. But God willing,
Hmm.
maybe
Yeah, I was gonna
somebody
say we're.
could say something.
Yeah, yeah, mashallah. Yeah, I was gonna say that's correct. Mashallah, I agree with John. In that sense, like for example, like we're humans, we're weak. Okay, so we're gonna have these feelings, right? But how do we deal with these feelings? Like when we're in such situations, are we gonna give in to these feelings and be afraid, and lose our peace of mind, or are we going to say no, just reassure ourselves that God is running everything. This person who is going to rob me or whatever, I know for a fact that if I have $20 or 20 pounds or euros, whatever it is, in my bank or in my pocket, he doesn't have the power to do anything. If God doesn't want me to have that thing, I'm not going to have it, right? I'm only going to get what God gives me, right? What else is there? My life. Well, if God decides for me to die today, I will die today. If it's a scratch, a person who's robbing me cannot even scratch me if it's not God's will for him to allow me to be scratched. So God is in full control. I don't have to be afraid of anything. So we have to train ourselves to be that way more and more. And I think as our soul grows more and more, like we can get better at it, But some of those feelings will exist, like the instincts of like the brother talked about the chemical reactions in your body, and how things work. They do happen, right? But you have to how you deal with them, right? Like let's say you get in front of a large crowd. I mean, it's normal for your heart to feel like overwhelmed and with all these emotions and adrenaline and all of that, right? But you have to calm yourself down and tell yourself that God is in full control, right? That's why we are here as an educational experience, and a test to train ourselves, to re-educate ourselves, to understand that God is the one who is in full power and he's doing everything. And actually I have an interest, it reminded me of an interesting story one time. Well, I mean, I was robbed before I was a submitter, but I was not really afraid. I don't know why I wasn't afraid at that time. But there was another time when there was a I went to a place. It was like in some really bad neighborhood in near Washington, and there was a person next to me who had a gun, and I had just taken out $1,100 from my bank account, and I never carry any cash, and I had $1,100 in my bank account, and he came with a gun. And he robbed the guy like literally next to me and took all his money and left. And I was just calm. I was nothing phased me, like nothing happened. I was like, wow, he has a gun. Like maybe I was in shock or something, But thank God, like I was fine. Subhanallah. So, just, anyway, just I wanted to share, reminded me of that.
Yeah, mashallah. I have experienced also something, brother, like in my life after I became a submitter. I have two kids, and when I had my first child, I wasn't a submitter yet. So, with my second child, I already was a submitter, and we had like some difficulties. Like even when we went to the hospital, the nurses they said like you were like right on time. If you were like 5 minutes late, then it was going to be like very bad for the child and for the mother. But
Hmm.
I remember clearly how I was thinking at the moment when the doctor urgently took the doctors. They took my wife to the operating room,
Hmm.
and there were like 8 or 9 people. They were in a hurry, and there was clearly something, some danger. But at the
Hmm.
moment, I remember clearly how I was thinking. Because I became a submitter, I always, and I learned from the messenger. And I repeated to myself, like, God is running everything, like He is doing everything, He is running everything. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. I was preparing myself, the decisions that God makes. If He decides to take their lives, my wife's and my child's, then I should be prepared to accept it. I was repeating this to myself. I was saying He is doing everything. Relax. If God decides to do something, it's right. This is the moment where I need to prove that I am submitting to His will. How difficult it may be. This is the moment. Like, if I'm now not going to submit to His will, then when am I going to do that, right? In
Hmm.
normal times, it's very easy to say that you submit to the will of God, but in these
Hmm.
very difficult times, that's like makes, I think, a
Hmm.
difference. So
Hmm.
these feelings and these ideas and the things that I have learned, it actually helped me, and it made me extremely relaxed. So I was laughing, and I was looking at the doctors, and they were saying things to me, but I knew at the time, I know God is doing it, God is running everything, so it doesn't really matter what's
Hmm.
going to happen. I fully
Hmm.
accept it. So it makes you very relaxed, actually, knowing this
Hmm.
information that He is in full control.
Inshallah.
Another thing is that regarding the thinking about God, 51% of the day part. So you have to individually think about God, or let's say do two things together. For example, if I'm studying, can I do dhikr at the same time while studying? Or do I have to do dhikr independently?
Right. I think like like you there. I mean, that's I think diving a little more into psychology and stuff. But like, let's say you're studying, right? So you have your active, thoughts like on your conscious, and you have your subconscious, right? And so like actively, let's say you're studying a math equation. Of course, it needs your focus. You're following, some specific formula, whatever, and calculations. You're not going to be doing two things at once, right? Like that. But at least God will be at the back of your mind,
Yes.
and you will understand that God is the one who's teaching me. God, please make it easy for me. God is the one who's helping me,
Also,
and that way, it
yeah,
becomes the same thing, basically. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good answer. I just wanted to piggyback off of that. It's like Suleiman said, God's on the back of your mind, and then if you come across something interesting, like for work, I was learning something new, and or I was YouTubing something, and then it tying into what I'm learning, and I was like, oh, subhanallah. Just like in a little example I'm giving, like that's the physics
Hmm.
behind how that works is so interesting. I
Hmm.
was like, man, how could you even like how could I mean, glory be to God, like just creating these
Hmm.
different variations, and then being
Yeah.
able to jump back into work. And like
Yeah.
Brother Suleiman gave the example, God is teaching you because like after a while, like some of the stuff I was, just work related because I think that's or school. I think the example you gave, but like some of the stuff I'm learning, I'm like, man, it's God teaching me. It's not these people because like I'm able to absorb the information needed to learn, and it like was an
Hmm.
opportunity also to be
Hmm.
appreciative.
Yeah, and then also another thing I see is that, let's say if you're learning anything like about the sciences or things like that, that also helps you reflect, from the perspective of, how Earth works or how the world works, how God has made it work. So, I mean, I always think about these types of things as I'm studying stuff, like anything, I guess, other than computers. Well, which even if you're studying about computers, I mean, God created the creature, right? And so you're thinking about, oh wow, like that's amazing how God makes the creature work and have it think just like any other creature would in a lot of ways. So things like that, you find connections, and like excuses to think about God as you're going through your work, right? But not
Okay,
like
so
you're constantly doing zikr and also trying to follow something complex.
okay, so let's say, for example, I'm studying math equations, and so I'm thinking about how God used maths to create the universe. In this
Hmm.
situation, I'll be consciously thinking about my maths work, and subconsciously in the background thinking about God. So does
Hmm.
subconscious thinking count as
Of
devotion?
course. Yeah, it does. It does because God says that He holds us responsible for our innermost thoughts. Right? It's a verse from the Quran. He holds us responsible for our intentions. So when you're thinking about God and this is your intention, then it counts as a form of worship, right? As like the Messenger of the Covenant has given examples also about this in other examples, and I think one of the examples just came in my mind and it skipped. But if and the but the eating part is a good example too. But I mean, you could say you could be actively thinking about it. But I think, yeah, one example he gives about is like going to work, right? So let's say you're going to work, you just don't go to work thinking I'm going to work so I can make money, and you're on the job, I'm going to my work to just make money so I can pay my bills and stuff. You're going to work because you're going to use that money to give to charity and strive, right? So that's in the back of your mind in a way, in your subconscious, you have this idea that you're going to do this. So that counts. God says anything not even smaller than an atom's weight, is counted in the record, right? So God counts each and everything. So if we think that there's anything that God is not aware of, that's sort of undermining God's power, or the fact that if you think that you can think things or that will not count, then that kind of goes towards like injustice. It's like you do an assignment and the teacher is very sensitive and like paying close attention to all the work you did, and they're paying attention to things that you did on top of what was asked, to give you extra credit and all that, and the teacher just ignores that because that's not part of it or whatever. But that's not what God does. God is extremely just. So let's say a person is just doing the bare minimum and just maybe thinking here and there, but then you have another person who's deeply devoted to God and who's thinking about God as God is on his mind, in his conscious and his subconscious. Of course that person is going to get credit for it, right? And even like it doesn't magically even go into your subconscious. You have to do a lot of active thinking to make it part of your thoughts, right? To even be in your subconscious, right? Yeah, so I mean all of that will count, definitely.
Mashallah, or like even make it second nature eventually. Because like I was just in the store,
Mm-hmm.
for example, and like how we have the commandments to do your eyes, and I mean what the country we live in and just the culture and stuff is different here. I mean I'm from here, so it's like normal to me, but in the sense of like it's everywhere. But like a women, the way they're dressed and stuff, and I can see like immediately through my peripherals, like I'm in the checkout, and like instead of like glancing over and looking, like I can already like it was like a conscious action, like just to, pay attention to the cashier, just stuff like that. And I thought about God in those moments, you know. Um, so like if when you're talking about subconscious stuff, second, or stuff can get become like second nature. Um, I mean that's a form of obeying God and following His commandments and stuff. So I mean, God will help us too. He'll make it easier for us.
Yeah, so you're saying it becomes like automatic.
Yeah, basically, yeah, it becomes automatic. I mean, it's something that's kind of like you said, like you still, it's like you still kind of actively think about, but it becomes like automatic. Yeah, like like easy in the sense where it doesn't take much effort, like in the beginning, you know, where a lot of things take so much effort, but then like you had said earlier, and like the messenger talked about too, you know, the more you grow your soul and stuff, you know, the easier like things get, you know, and like
Yeah,
you'll be
mashallah.
happier too, you know.
Yeah, mashallah. I mean, brother shared a verse on chat also 67, 12 and 13. As for those who reverence their Lord, even when alone in their privacy, they have attained forgiveness and a great recompense. And it says, whether you keep your utterances secret or declare them, he's fully aware of the innermost thoughts. That's the verse I was referring to earlier. Yeah, mashallah.
Mashallah.
Yeah. Oh, mashallah. I didn't read your messages, brother Adam, up until now. It says you're 17 years old. I didn't know that.
Oh yes, I'm 17.
Oh,
That's why I'm
mashallah.
Adam 17.
So,
Mashallah.
Oh, mashallah. I thought you were older. You're
yeah.
very well
Oh,
spoken.
mashallah. Good
Oh,
for you,
thanks.
brother.
Yeah, good for you, brother. That's awesome.
Yeah, so if you have a long life, this means you have more time to grow your soul, right? So
Yeah,
that makes you a lucky person, mashallah.
thank you, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, we have also very young brothers in the Turkish study. You know, there's one brother who's 13 years old, and
Oh,
he,
wow.
yeah, mashallah, brother. He's like very smart. Uh, and he asks very good questions, you know, you can see he's very smart, mashallah. So yeah.
Yeah, and I also want to say, like, it's important to never get discouraged too, you know, because like we can, like the messenger, you know, we see the examples in the sermons and stuff. Like if we didn't do so good one day, I mean, at least we might have caught ourselves, or we can say, hey, tomorrow's going to be better. You know, like if we got distracted with something too much, or you know, because I've seen or knows, I guess it happens to more people than not, but like having kind of personally witnessed this, kind of like a defeatism mentality from someone close to me that kind of checks out from believing in a sense because you know they're consumed with guilt. So you know, I just wanted to throw that out there, but not to say we can't use that as you know as good ammunition for us to improve, but in the sense where you know some people self sabotage and stuff. But I mean, obviously as submitters, like we're not worried about that, but just wanted to put that out there.
Sorry, John. I think I missed that. What was what was your comment again?
It was just basically not being discouraged. You know, if we don't do so good on one day, we just you know have
Keep
hope
trying.
that tomorrow's going to be better and stuff, and not spiral out. Because like I think you might know, but yeah, you might kind of know like who I'm referring to, someone close, you know, and dope. But yeah,
Someone close?
yeah, yeah. You talk to them on the phone. Like they're consumed with guilt.
Oh,
They mess up or miss a
oh,
prayer, so
oh, right, right, right,
they
right. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah. It's like they
yes.
miss a prayer and then they just end up, um, and they're
Uh,
not really doing it too, because just like it really is like a guilt complex and stuff, and so they just throw in the towel or something. But I mean,
oh.
Satan's behind that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So this happened,
Abraham said, "Never despair in the mercy of God."
right, right.
And
So
as long
this,
as,
right.
huh?
So you're saying this happened after we talked to them?
No, I mean it happened before, but like I'm not really. I haven't heard too much from. I'm gonna have to
Mm-hmm.
check on them.
Mm-hmm.
God
Okay.
willing,
Okay.
God willing, it'll be okay. But yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brother Adam, is your name actually Adam or is that like your nickname?
That's my actual name.
Okay, okay, okay. Cool. Yeah, I was gonna say, God willing, maybe your dad could also join. It sounds like he's a submitter too. I mean, that would
Yes.
be nice to hear from him as well.
Yeah, he's the one who introduced me to the server, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so his name is Green Gardens on Navid's submission group.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, we'd love to meet with him as well.
God willing, he will join as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that'd be fantastic.
By the way, do you have any knowledge about approximately, how many submitters there are worldwide? Because I couldn't find any information.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, to be honest, like I have met a lot of people that say they're submitters, but then ultimately, as you get close to them, like you find out that they are not actually following the message in its entirety, and like they may have diverted, here and there in a lot of things, and like so. I technically don't um, like consider them submitters. Submitters, like I mean, because the thing is that people don't realize that when we come into submission, we really become Satan's prime targets, and Satan actively starts working on diverting people from submission once they join because he doesn't want these people to be redeemed because other people, most of them are already going to hell because they're committing idol worship or just doing all kinds of other sins. But for the submitters, people who come on this path, that's just the beginning of our journey to be redeemed. We become like really high on Satan's radar. And so he tries really actively to try to divert those people. And he has succeeded in diverting people in masses, like especially with submitters too. Like there's communities of people in many parts of the world that identify as submitters, and they say they follow the message and they follow the same message of Dr. Rashad Khalifa, and they accept the mathematical code. But they're doing things and accepting things that are not part of the Quran. Like, for example, in the US, we have large groups, like in California, like there's groups in other places like Tucson, there's communities, smaller communities in India, other places, but they have diverted from the truth in a way. Satan has misled them. Like some of them will not accept teachings from the messenger of the covenant. I'm sure you have some idea about that, right? But then you have other people that have like incorporated other traditional practices into their religion that are not part of submission and not part of the Quran, like circumcision, etc. And so I mean, there are people that say they're submitters, but really, I mean, I've met all, not all of them. I would say, I mean, of course, I would be have to be like superhuman, but like I've met most of the people that I'd say here, over the last 20 years. that have like come to conferences and like other types of group events or online through interactions with them over email or chat and stuff. And it's like, yeah, they say they're submitters, but Satan eventually leads them astray big time, and they still think that they're submitters and they're doing the right thing and they know better, in whatever way. But clearly, when we look at the Quran and look at the requirements and look at the teachings, they're off by a big, a portion, significantly off, from the path. So we have to be. That's why we have to be kind of cautious. Unfortunately, I mean, like anybody who says it, they're submitters or calls themselves, follower of the message and 19 and the message of the covenant, like you have to dig deeper and understand, what they actually believe.
I see. So, how many people would you say that are at least submitted by name, at least like followers of Rashad?
By name, right? So from what I know, it's like at least over 1,000. I know, like in India, as a community, then there might be other groups, people or individuals scattered across the country, maybe. But then, yeah, so like at least over 1,000 in India. Like I would say roughly like um, maybe 500, 600 or slightly more in the U.S. Like maybe and then probably like a few hundred in the rest of the world, right? Maybe. So
I see. It makes
not
sense.
that many. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that's most of them will divert. That's quite a lot, though. Most of these submitters.
Hmm.
Yeah, the thing is, I always thought that's being a true submitter is so easy. All you have to do is believe in code 19, one God, pray 5 times a day with humbleness, like probably pray,
Hmm.
avoid some sins, and just think about God subconsciously throughout the day. I mean, for me, that's so easy. Like, why is that
Hmm.
everybody else is failing to do so?
Right, because the thing is, Satan is a very tricky creature, right? And he finds ways, like how God specifically commanded Adam, not to eat from the tree. Like if we think submission is easy, right?
Yes,
Imagine like how easy it was for Abraham. No, sorry, not Abraham, like Adam, because he didn't have contact prayers or even a lot of these things. Like they just had to believe in God alone. But Satan was able to mislead him and get him, dupe him with lies and get him out of paradise, right? So it's very easy. Like, I'll give you one example, right? So, like, we know, and it's easy, right? We know that we're supposed to follow the Quran alone, and if anything is not in the Quran, we don't accept it. It may or may not be right. We don't care. We don't accept it. Period. And the messenger has been very direct about that. But then you have groups, including actually, there's groups in England and London specifically who believe in that, right? They call themselves submitters, and I know them very well, and then they started believing that circumcision is part of the religion. Imagine now, where in the Quran or in any of the teachings from the Message of the Covenant does Rashad Khalifa ever talk about circumcision as practice of our religion or say that it was given to Abraham? Nowhere, right? And he talks about the covenant of Abraham being the things that is mentioned about Hajj and doing the prayers, all these things that were given to him, period. And then they go ahead and they start taking things that were injected in the Bible or things that people are talking from Hadith and go and try to connect dots and go nitpicking in other places and come to the conclusion that submission and circumcision is a part of religion, right? And these are not people that have not read the Quran. These are people that have read the Quran at least for like 15 plus years, uh, you know, 2 or 3 times a week in group discussions and individually almost every day, right? For several years, and they come to these types of conclusions. So, so it is definitely something that we have to be aware of. That once someone says they're going to follow submission, and even though it's very straightforward, Satan will find ways to try to divert people. I mean, that's what has happened throughout time. If you look at all these people, from Judaism, Christianity, Islam, who came into the religion was simple, but Satan came and diverted them. He finds ways and means to get in, and trick people like that. And then what he does is he finds one or two people in these groups who are like, considered on the top, and then he makes them believe certain things, and then they dictate to other people what they're supposed to accept, and then everybody just blindly follows. I mean, that's what we've seen in submission too. There are people that are, sort of like leaders, and then, they will say certain things, and then, some other people will back them up, and then the entire groups will just follow them in a herd like sheep. So that's the reality, basically.
Yeah. So
Mashallah, brother. I was gonna say simple is probably a better way of saying it because God caused this path a
sorry,
difficult
Raphael.
path.
I was gonna say something, but interrupted. But Suleiman, you spoke about circumcision and how some Semites they believe in circumcision. Now that's a sin of beda or innovation. Is
Hmm.
beda a major sin?
Yes, it's idol worship, because you have another God beside God who's commanding you to do these things.
Right. So let's say a Semite believes in the Quran and only accepts circumcision. Is that shirk?
Yeah, because you don't have to, like, there's no threshold, like you can have, like, how much idol worship you can do, right? You have committed idol worship, like, imagine someone is following all the parts of submission, and then he just accepts Jesus as a God, right? So it doesn't have to be Jesus, it can be the Pope, it can be anybody, a rabbi, or any religious leader for that matter, who comes up with his own dogma, right? And he starts and you adopt it as your path, and you're following him instead of God now. So Satan makes the claim he got you. That's all he needs. That's why we have to strictly stick to the Quran.
Yeah, because Naveed and Triple A, they were saying that circumcision is a part of religion.
Yeah, that's true. So this is why they're misled by Satan as a result. He's not allowed on this group, specifically for that and some other reasons as well. Yeah, so just uh, I mean, these people are diverted by God, unfortunately. I mean, the messenger of the covenant has been very clear, and if you look at Appendix 18, right, in the Quran, it says anything that is not specifically instituted in the Quran is following a religion other than submission, right? So if you're following a religion other than submission, by accepting anything, then you're committing idol worship. And it said the moment you seek guidance other than the Quran, I mean, Satan captures you basically. He's looking for like little bit of room, just to get in. So while I find that, maybe brother Rafael, you were making a comment too. You can share a comment, please.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that when you were talking, I was also thinking like it's probably better to say it's very simple. The concept is very simple, but it's not easy. And we see in the Quran that God calls this path, submission to Him alone, the difficult path. So it's not easy.
Right, mashallah. Yeah, so that's true. And so this is in Appendix 18. It says, Quran, all you need for salvation. Right? I'm going to read from part of it. It says, God did not forget, for example, tell us how to sleep. Yet the fabricators of such false doctrine as Hadith and Sunnah have come up with religious teachings dictating to their followers how to sleep and even how to cut your nails. The sacred mosque in Mecca, etc. I'm going to skip that. So it says the Quran proclaims that the Quran is complete, perfect, and fully detailed, meaning everything that we need to follow is part of the Quran, right? So it says, and the religious regulations not specifically instituted in the Quran constitute a religion other than submission, other than Islam, that is submission, right? And it says the true believers uphold the Quran, the whole Quran, and nothing but the Quran. So it's clearly spelled out
Plus, they're satisfied
here.
with it. You know,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
not gonna go looking for
So
other sources and stuff.
yeah,
Because God
mhm,
doesn't advocate evil and
mhm.
torture, basically. And uh, so I mean, sorry if this offends anybody, but pedophilia. I mean, with the video that's shared about the guy from Harvard, the Harvard professor that I mean showed graphic pictures of I mean this is where this stuff comes from. If you look into it, even from a non-submitter perspective, there are people that are starting to see this stuff like as wicked, um, like even from a non-submitter perspective, and which also validates it as a satanic practice too. Because I mean, if you look at the Jewish traditions of what these their priests, or what they call it as rabbis, and what they're doing to these kids and stuff after circumcision, these rituals, man, it's almost mind blowing. You know,
Hmm.
it's pretty disturbing,
Hmm.
but you know, like God says, we shouldn't shy away from the truth. Like He doesn't shy away from the truth, so that's kind of why I said what I say, because it's you know we have to be straightforward and really see
Hmm.
this stuff as from Satan, and it can be difficult too, because like growing up as a Christian, you know, in this country, it's like, oh man, like no, it's normal, like, but after coming into submission, you know, I'm realizing, well, it became really simple in the sense, like, look, it's not in the Quran, like we don't accept it, and you know, just the information Brother Suleiman just read from the Quran, you know,
Hmm.
it's you know,
Yeah, well, sure. Also, one other part I'd like to read from Appendix 19. It says, some Muslims compromise. If a hadith agrees with the Quran, we will accept it. And if it contradicts the Quran, we will reject it. Such premise proves that the people do not believe in God's assertion that the Quran is complete, perfect, and fully detailed. It says, the moment that they seek guidance from anything besides the Quran, no matter how quote unquote right it seems, they fall into Satan's trap, right? So basically, it's nothing but Satan's trap. And the moment they do that, they're trapped by Satan, right? Once you're trapped by Satan, you're done, right? It doesn't matter if it's one item or two items or three items. There is no specific number that makes you an idol worshiper. They're following a religion that is not part of, that is not Islam. If there's any regulations that are not specifically mentioned in the Quran and you follow them, it's not submission. You're not following submission because you have made up another God besides God, right? If you have another source besides the Quran, you're falling into idol worship. That's the principle as to why we don't have other sources besides the Quran, right? So if and we know idol worship is unforgivable offense if maintained till death. So if these people uh, die believing what they believe, they're not going to go to paradise. That's God's law.
Yeah. Another thing is that so spoke how Navi's they believe in circumcision, which is something prohibited to believe in a submission in Islam. Sorry. I think is that in that group channel. Have you been there, right? Have you been there?
I have been there, yes, a few times, yes.
Right. And so are they incorrect in several things, or like just the circumcision?
They're incorrect in several things. I mean, every time I've gone there, like I've experienced, like I've heard ridiculous things. So I've stopped participating because of that. Like I was really pulled into it, like repeatedly, insistently, like asked to join them. So I ended up, joining of like almost compulsion in some way, you can say, and then I left. So yeah.
Yeah. And so I join the group quite regularly. And so in your opinion, do you see that if I like keep on joining and learning everything they say, do you think that it will lead me to the right path, or is a lot of the things they're saying diverting me away from the truth?
Yeah, I definitely think that God says, like from my perspective, of course, these people are hypocrites, and God says you do not befriend the hypocrites because if you do, it's God's principle that they will rub off on you. So you might think you're a great or strong person, and you know the difference between right and wrong, and you can judge and you can control yourself into like distinguishing, and you'll just maybe, let's say, listen to the right stuff and maybe disregard the wrong stuff. But the thing is that when you start commingling with these people, like God says, don't befriend them, right? So, like as we talked about the category of people that you could hang out with, I mean, hypocrites is the worst category to hang out with, right? Of all the people in the world, because God says the hypocrites go to the lowest rank of hell, right? They're the worst people in the world, worse than disbelievers. So if you hang out with them, you're breaking God's law, and then you're also risking yourself becoming just like them, because eventually, you'll start thinking like them. They'll start to, as the messenger says, rub off on you. So definitely, it's something that I wouldn't recommend anybody doing.
I see. So you said that they said some ridiculous things. So apart from circumcision, what other
Mhm.
ridiculous things did they say?
Like, I mean, I've heard like way out stuff. Like they were saying, God's like the recent thing I've heard. Well, first of all, the circumcision thing is just not trivial. Like, I mean, it's huge, right? What they're saying, and then apart from that, they're saying other things like recently what I heard is that God supports Israel because they have freedom of religion, and I mean they're breaking so many of God's laws, right? And so, and you're telling people that God supports them. God says that they are the worst they are the worst enemies of the believers. And you have one country in the world that is actually officially run by Israel as a Jewish state. And then you're saying that these people are supported by God. I mean, God is very clear on who He supports. People who are on the right path. So that, and then I mean, of course, there's other things like the way they approach, like they say, like if you disagree with them, like they want to put you on trial and stuff like that. Like everything, the way they run this whole thing is just very evil, and every time I've gone on that group, I've seen people like belligerently, attacking other people, and then also, they they have rabbis, people who and self-proclaimed messengers that they allow on their server, and they use them as props according to them, which they allow them to commingle and try to convert other people. There are people there, like this one guy, he was a rabbi, he was trying to convert me to Judaism, if you can believe that, and he was a submitter before. And I told him that this guy's there, he's trying to convert me. He's like, oh no, don't take him seriously. And nobody takes him seriously, and he should be taken very seriously because he knows Arabic, the Quran. He knows about the Quran's mathematical miracle in great detail, and having all these things, he's equipped to mislead people, and God says you don't hang out with these people, right? So, and you're not only I mean, you're just completely welcoming them with open arms, allying with them, and especially with these Jewish rabbis specifically, because it helps validate their ideas about circumcision. They back them up, for example, like, look, this is what our Jewish brothers believe or whatever. And they know about it, right? They know that there is a conflict of dispute, between people about circumcision, and specifically me. And that's why that guy specifically targeted me and was trying to convince me. And he was trying to actually tell me, like, oh, like, imagine he was somebody who proclaimed to be a messenger. Like when he was talking to me, he came and was like, oh, don't talk to this guy. He's a lost cause or whatever. But you have all these people who are lost cause, you say, and they're misleading other people, and then you are welcoming them into your server to try to mislead other people, right? So God says, for example, we don't go to places of worship there where people are committing idol worship because they're polluted, right? And so these people are also idol worshippers because they're following innovation, following religious innovations and other sources besides the Quran in itself is idol worship, right? So why do you want to go and be with idol worshippers? And why you're inviting, on top of being an idol worshiper, you're inviting disbelievers and fake messengers and enemies of the believers into your thing for just so you can boast about your numbers, and say, well, we're the largest group in the of submitters online and blah blah blah, like all the egotistical claims. It's very cocky and not submitter like, I mean, and so I mean there's other things, like minor things here and there. I mean, I don't even pay attention anymore. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. The fact that I see them as hypocrites because they're advocating things other than the Quran, because they have all these idol worshippers and disbelievers and fake messengers, and like that's enough for me to not be a part of them. Like I don't want anything to do with them, because to me my soul is the most precious thing that I need to protect, right? So I don't want to risk my submission for any of these things. Like, I can find submitter friends, or even if I don't have any friends, let's say I'm better off. At least I'm not gonna go to hell for being friends with such people, right? So you're better off not being part of them, in summary. But yeah, I mean, if you wanna find out other things, I mean, you just have to pay attention. I don't even have the time or patience to be in their discussions. I find them very repulsive. But if you listen to them closely, like they'll talk about a lot of other things, but like not as prominent as like circumcision, that's easy to spot. But they say things that don't make sense, or saying things that are clearly contradicted in the Quran. Like I gave you the example of Israel, that's just an example. But there could be other examples where they're extracting things from things that the Messenger of the Covenant has said, but they've taken them out of context and blown them out of proportion and twisted them to make it part of religion, or part of the way they understand whatever they're trying to push to other people.
All right. So when do they take the things that the Messenger of the Covenant said out of context? Because I never spotted that.
When did they do that? I mean, they do that all the time.
Like how?
like like for example, I gave you the example of Israel, right? That was a perfect example, because he said the messenger said that the submission is going to be the heart of America. And so because Israel is an ally of America, that God supports Israel. Doesn't make any sense logically speaking, right? But you have taken something the messenger said. Same thing with circumcision. The messenger, for example, he published the first Quran, which when he was still mentioning some things that were taken out later from the Quran, like the false, I believe it was the false shahada and stuff, was the first ever Quran and which he said was obsolete, right? And so in that there was not even a footnote, but an end note at the end of the book in small prints, where it's referencing some verses in the Bible that are talking about Ishmael and Isaac being from the progeny of Abraham, right? And so in it, there is a reference to the word circumcision, because it's pointing to the fact that, hey, look, the messenger was making a point that, look, in the Bible, there are verses that point out to the fact that, Ishmael was one of the descendants of Abraham, or son of Abraham. And so and even in that explanation, like the messenger of the covenant has gone out of his way to explain, even in that earliest version, that he says, the Bible is corrupt. There's, even though there are portions within parts of the Bible which are correct, and a careful study is necessary, to weed those out. But yet, when there's an end note at the very end of the book, at the last page, with the very fine small prints where the word circumcision is mentioned, they'll use that to say, look, the messenger mentioned here, and they reference this verse and it says circumcision. Another example, it says the messenger of the covenant gives us the example of Rabbi the Judah, right? As in the footnote that says Rabbi Judah accepted the miracle, right? And it's like, look, Rabbi Judah accepted the miracle. One of them came up with this, found this book that Rabbi Judah wrote in the 11th century, translated in English. Now remember, what's the difference between someone finding a book of Rabbi Judah in 11th century and someone finding a book about Muhammad and saying, look, it says Rabbi Judah is talking about circumcision. And so the messenger said, they specifically say the messenger said Rabbi Judah was a believer. And so if Rabbi Judah was a believer, why would he follow circumcision? The messenger said Rabbi Judah was a believer. So circumcision is a part of religion. So there's all these ridiculous examples. I don't keep a tab on all the things that they do, but these are things on top of my head that I can remember that I just wanted to share with you. But there's definitely a lot of other things. Um,
They
I've
don't
heard many
necessarily.
ridiculous things.
Yeah. So they don't necessarily contradict any verse of Quran, do they?
No, they do, of course, because one says follow the Quran alone, and then you're going to all these sources. Aren't you contradicting?
Oh yes.
These are contradictions, right?
Oh yes. No, but yeah, I understand that they're contradicting the Quran in that way. I'm saying apart from that, like so, say for example, Quran verse says to not eat pork. They
Yeah,
wouldn't
of
say
course. It's not going to be that obvious, right? Yeah, because they think they're submitted. They think they're following everything.
yes. So apart from like circumcision, do they ever contradict any other verse of the Quran? For example, oh, there's one thing that's out of the context, but they say that's Nabi was saying that the Sunnis believe in abrogation, but we don't. Is abrogation a part of Islam or not? For example, when it comes to drinking alcohol.
Abrogation of like
Yes.
abrogation of verses.
Yeah. Is that part or not?
Is that part of what? Part of
I mean,
submission?
yes, exactly.
No, I mean, God doesn't change his mind about things, right? I mean, if God has given us the Quran, I mean, he has given us the verses, he doesn't like make mistakes and stuff that he has to scratch things and reveal, like, he doesn't make mistakes, right? So that part is fine. Like, like when this is a interpretation of of a verse that God says when he abrogates a miracle or he will send an equal one or a new one, for example, or God erases whatever he wills and fixes whatever he wills, and then they'll use it to say, well, based on hadith. That's just based on hadith, right? That they think that God reveals certain verses and then they were abrogated and then he sent something else. So is that what you're referring to?
Yes. For example, the alcohol verse. There's a list of
Uh-huh.
conditions of alcohol at first. Then later on, alcohol was completely forbidden.
No, I mean alcohol was always forbidden, even in the Old Testament. If you see in the Bible, it's still mentioned that alcohol is forbidden. And if you look at it from the perspective of the Quran, God calls it an abomination of the devil. So it's not like it was ever permissible.
No, but one
Um,
verse says not to drink it before you go to the mosque, which means that beforehand it was permissible to
But
drink
it
alcohol.
doesn't mean that you can drink it otherwise. It just says it's going to distract people from remembering God. So it says when you're intoxicated. I mean, and look, intoxication can be from multiple things. Like let's say you go to a dentist and you get a tooth extracted or something, or you had a surgery, right? You could be intoxicated because you could be under anesthesia. It doesn't mean necessarily you have to drink alcohol, right? So there could be circumstances where you could be intoxicated by many things. Like let's say you had an accident or something, God willing. I mean, no submitter should have. But let's say you had some kind of accident and doctors had to give you something, or you had some major surgery on your leg or whatever, on your knee or whatever, even. So you have to be on strong meds to be sedated for those surgeries to be even possible, right? For you to not go into shock and all that. So in those situations, you are intoxicated, right? So but that doesn't mean that it was ever okay or anything like that. God has used it in very strict terms that all intoxicants are prohibited, right? And if you look at the appendix on intoxicants and drugs and alcohol, the Messenger of the Covenant has explained it categorically that they're all forbidden, right? So there's no compromise whatsoever he said on these things. So and there never was like and there's no such thing because if you think about it, like we as humans would abrogate things and say things and then change our minds and stuff like that in that way, right? But God has written the Quran. It's all mathematically composed, right? And God has protected it the whole time. So God wouldn't like it doesn't make sense for God to reveal something and then take it away and then reveal something else. Or if you're talking about just I think you're talking more like along the lines of God saying something and then retracting it or
Yes,
in that manner, right?
exactly.
But even in that manner, like as I explained to you, I mean, this is if you really look into the Bible too, like there are and I
Yeah, in the
think
Old
maybe John
Testament.
yeah.
Yeah, in Deuteronomy and another part it says God is indivisible and God does not change at all. And
Mm-hmm.
that's that's a big argument that people, the Pauline Christians today cannot answer because that's why they love the New Testament because their hearts secretly desire an easy way out because if they have to
No, I
follow
mean,
the commandments and the law, but
yeah, the
God does
verses
not
about
change. That's
the
an Old Testament.
yeah, I mean the verse.
God,
I'm talking about the verses about the alcohol. Like it says, John did never drank wine, right? John, you never. I'm not talking about
yeah.
you.
John the
Talk about John in
Baptist
the
never.
Bible. Yeah.
No, like it's the same thing with Solomon and how they lied and said he. I mean, this is like the scholars and theologians all unanimously agree. They don't even know who wrote the book of John. The book of John had 4 different authors. It wasn't even authored by John. So, and then a lot of the books of Paul were made by his followers. But yeah, just to summarize, I mean, the lies against the prophets. I mean, it's talking about in Isaiah. He spoke about prophesied. I mean, about referred to them as the wicked hands of the scribes, who twist the word of God, attribute things to Lot, Solomon, about him sending his top general to die in war and stuff. I mean, and these are supposed to be, and it even confuses a lot of Christians today, but um, it's also a way maybe for the intentions or why these people did it when they translated this stuff is I mean who knows, maybe they wanted people to deviate so they then too could deviate. Oh, I can drink now because look at the prophets drank or did this isn't that bad, or everybody falls short, it's okay, just
Okay.
believe in Jesus. But
What? Yeah. I mean, what I was referring to was the verses that talk about drinking in the Bible. So, like Ephesians 5:18, for example, says, "Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit." And it says, "Wine is a mocker." And Proverbs
yeah,
21 says, "Wine is a mocker and beer is a brawler. Whoever is led
yeah.
astray by them is not wise." Right? There's
Yeah,
Amos
Proverbs,
Peter.
right? But they take a few
Yeah,
other verses out of context,
yeah.
or like they'll say, like, "Oh, like Jesus turned water into wine, so it's okay to drink alcohol." Like, no, you
Mhm.
you don't know that he did that.
Yeah, so I mean, we know that they've corrupted it and added other things on the
Yeah,
contrary, right? But there's
yeah,
still like we still God and the messenger said, for
yeah. There's clear,
example,
right,
you can
right. Yeah,
still
there's
find the
clear.
truth in the
I'm
scriptures,
sorry, I
right?
probably didn't understand
Yeah,
your question completely, but yeah, there's
yeah, yeah.
clear prohibitions in the Bible for alcohol and pork, both pork too, and
Yeah, pork and alcohol, yeah, both.
yeah,
Yeah. So the verse, I think it was chapter 2, verse 162, spoke about how Allah abrogated. So that we abrogated the verse, something like that. I don't remember. What was that referred to?
Are you talking about the Sabbath, right? So that God says Sabbath was just decreed for the. So that was something that God had decreed, and then it was just decreed for those people. So God abrogated it, right? So that's different because God doesn't abrogate something that He didn't even decree, right? So, like for example, like people may use for um, other examples to say, well, this was allowed first, and then now this wasn't allowed. But that's not the case with the Quran, clearly. Yeah. And alcohol, I mean, God would not allow anything that God says is an abomination of the devil, right? That would not be godly.
Okay, yeah, I had a look at the context, and yes, I think that's because Sunnis they're speaking about abrogation beforehand, and for
Mm-hmm.
example, Zakir Naik was quoting the verse about abrogation and spoke about how we abrogated the verse, etc. And right
Mm-hmm.
now, look at the Rosh Khalifa's version, and it shows how like sorry, it shows how like it's taken out of context because I read the
Mm-hmm.
entire verse, and the verse was about Solomon. And so they just took one snippet, one quote from the entire verse to twist the meaning of abrogation. That's what the Sunnis did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, it's not just Sunnis. I'm sure like there's Shias also that have
Yeah, she
beliefs
is.
in, yeah.
Oh yes. Okay, now we go left. And we spoke about how Triple A and Navid were were misguided. I'm
Hmm.
quite shocked hearing this because I always looked up to them, thinking that they're people of heaven, thinking that I wish I could become them, which I can't obviously, but I wish I could be like them because they're going to
No, I
heaven.
mean, the thing is, like, I would say, brother, that this thing how it goes, like, everything that glitters is not gold, right? So, sometimes, appearances can be deceiving. You may hear people about, so even Quran talks about it, right? You may see people, you may be impressed by their eloquence when they speak. You may be impressed by their utterances. They may sound knowledgeable, but doesn't mean that, like I said, everything that glitters is not gold, right? So if you dig in deeper, there are things that you will find. I mean, I know, for example, these people for many years. So, and there's probably a lot of things that probably shouldn't even get into about it, but and we can't, but yeah, I mean, everything that glitters is not gold. I mean, even people like, as far as like, a deep and stuff, like, they may come off as religious and righteous, but a lot of times you have to see, like, there's so many, for example, there's so many impressive personalities that you see on TV all the time, that if you didn't know the truth, or if you didn't know better, like, they sound so righteous, right? And so devoted to God, and oh my God, like, but they put on this fake persona in front of people, or even they may think they're righteous for whatever reason, right? But the thing is, only God really knows, like, what is in their hearts, and why they can't, despite all this knowledge that God has given them, they can't see the obvious things that are, so easy for us to understand. So we should never be. God says the appearances may be deceiving. So we have to dig in deeper and not take everything at its face value. Yeah, I mean, and that's just not to put any group or anybody down. It's just, as something for you to be aware of in general. Not just about that group, but just submitters in general. You have to be careful about that. That there's people that say they're submitters, but Satan has led them astray. Unfortunately, so we have to be aware of that, and check that whatever they're saying, if it's verified by the Quran or not, and if the messenger of the covenant has specifically talked about these things, or if they're just trying to connect the dots, and you know trying to make a sandcastle out of just things here and there, and trying to make it look like it's the truth when it's not. So I mean, God is the one who guides us, right? And he's the best guide. So God willing, he can
So
protect us from all of that. But it's our what your part is, that you shouldn't be part of these people. If you put yourself in that situation, and you start befriending these people, then you are voluntarily putting yourself out there, to be confused by them. And Satan, what as the messenger of the covenant says, what Satan wants to do, he just wants to put a little bit of doubt in you. Even if he puts a little bit of doubt in you, in the smallest strength. So all it takes is a little seed for them to put in your mind, and then you're in doubt, right? So we can't afford to have that for our souls. This time is too precious. Yeah, the other thing for me, when I think about it, is okay, the whole purpose of you being a Quranic study group is to learn about God, is to be with the believers, so you can rub off on each other. When you have all kinds of people in there, that defeats the purpose of even having a Quran study. You may be talking about God, but look who you're surrounding yourself with. So you're going against God's system. You're better off reading the Quran on your own than reading with all the people that are trying to lead you in all different directions.
Subhanallah, brother. The only reason why we're even here is to worship God alone.
Mm.
We got to be very careful. And, like, people could probably see these things like
they're nothing big, you know. But like for example, circumcision is a very big thing. It's idol worship, you know, and it's very bad.
Mm,
And you know, you see in the video of the messenger of the covenant, you know, he says it clearly. If it's not in the Quran, do not follow it.
mm-hmm,
You know, he says you're gonna hear a lot of opinions of a lot of people, but he says if it's not in the Quran, do not follow it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so exactly. And I think Brother Abdullah says someone asked on YouTube, hello, isn't circumcision in the Old Testament? Doesn't the Quran recognize the Torah? Yeah, so the Quran recognizes the Torah and the Bible in general, but we know that 10% of the Bible is nonsense injected by people, right? So just because you see in the Bible, we also see in the Bible that Jesus is God, right? Or Jesus is part of the Trinity, but we know that's nonsense and lies attributed to God. So these are injections that are in the things, and obviously that's why God has given us the Quran to confirm the truth. Now, the Quran talks about Abraham's covenant, and the Bible talks about Abraham's covenant. The Torah specifically talks about Abraham's covenant. But if you see in the Quran, the covenant of Abraham is completely different from the covenant of Abraham that's in the Torah. So we believe in the covenant of Abraham that God talks about in the Quran. So we know that was the correct covenant. And the messenger of the covenant was asked the same question about the covenant of Abraham. And he said there's a verse in the appendix from Surah 2 that you can see under the covenant of Abraham. And that's a covenant that he made with Abraham, meaning just one covenant. And that's listed in the index. And if you go look in the index, it's referring to Surah 2, verse 124, I believe. So we know clearly like it contradicts. For example, in the Bible, you're going to
Yeah,
read
sorry,
that.
I had to go
Yeah,
quickly. Like
yeah.
2 minutes, I'm back now. Just to let you know.
Sorry, what was that?
I had to go away quickly.
Oh,
Like
okay,
three
okay, no
minutes.
worries, no
I'm back
worries.
now.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, for example, it says in the Bible that Lot got drunk and had sex with his two daughters, right? So we don't recognize that. Obviously, there's no way on earth we're ever gonna accept that, right? So because anything you find in the Torah, we're not just gonna take it. Right? We have the Quran to confirm the truth. Yeah, so brother posted to 124 and 125. It says, recall that Abraham was put to the test by his Lord through certain commands, and he fulfilled them. God said, I'm appointing you an imam for the people. He said, also my descendants. He said, my covenant does not include the transgressors. We have rendered the shrine Kaaba a focal point for the people and a safe sanctuary. You may use Abraham's shrine as a prayer house. We commissioned Abraham and Ishmael, you shall purify my house for those who visit, those who live there, and those who bow and prostrate. So we can see clearly this is the Abraham's covenant, and there's clearly no mention of circumcision here, right? Yeah, yeah, my covenant, just one covenant, mashallah. Good point, Brother John. Yeah. All right, so I guess if there are no other comments or questions, God willing, we can conclude our study. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Brother Jaffer, for leading the study, and Brother Abdullah for streaming. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.